Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Zero to One. So we're actually going to switch things up slightly and give you a different format. So we're going to give you a chance to hear from two key members of the Dual Circle team. We have Jamie, our COO, you can see, and Yasas, our COO. And this time they're in the hot seat. So it's more of a relaxed behind the scenes fireside chat where we'll be able to dig into their journeys, challenges, wins, and how they could relate to you. The Dual Circle team have got a few questions lined up already, but feel free to drop some of yours in the chat. And with that out of the way, let's just dive right in. So,
Great.
Jamie, many founders and freelancers in the room are constantly thinking about how to grow and whether it's scaling revenue or reaching the right audience. So, from your experience, what's something people often overlook when it comes to building sustainable long-term growth?
Good question. There's quite a bit to unpack in that sense, so we'll try and break it down into some pieces, I guess. So we have the luxury, I guess, of working and the privilege as well, really working with so many members at different stages of their career. Some of which are maybe just starting their founder journey, and they've been working in corporate for a long time. And then there are others that are a little bit more established. They've had a business that's been in operation for a few years, and maybe what they're doing right now is scaling it and so on. Where we're at as a business, a doer circle, I guess, is we're in that position where we're scaling a business. We've been in operation for over 5 years now. We've built a significant member base across the region. So I think last count we have 150,000 members in 111 countries, but the majority of those are in Southeast Asia. That tends to be where most of our members are based. And really, so to sort of scale these types of things and how to tackle that is to understand where you're at in terms of the business right now to see, okay, what what is it that's working well so far? Where could you potentially improve as a business? So a lot of founders maybe their first port of call maybe is to overly kind of compare themselves against other businesses and say, okay, well, that business has raised that money, so why haven't I raised this, and so on. And the reality is that maybe they're further down their journey because they've achieved what we call product market fit, or PMF. You see mentioned elsewhere, for example. So product market fit is really the point of the business where you should be able to have a customer identify clearly what the value is that your business offers, your services, your products, whatever it may be. And they're at a point where they're also willing to potentially share your solutions and products with other people in their network as well. That's kind of a really basic definition of product market fit. And it's very difficult as a founder to reach product market fit because you do need to test different examples out. You need to do your research. You need to offer the service, you need to improve on the service and so on. And so I think when I again try and tie it back to what we're doing at Doer Circle, there are parts of the Doer Circle service, be it the community side of things, the solutions, the the networking opportunities, events, things like that, that I'd say that we've achieved that product market fit. But then there are other parts of the business that we're still working on. We're still trying to do. And I'd say maybe one of those focus areas, from my point of view, is on the enterprise side of things. So it's just to briefly touch on that before we also let Yasas maybe offer his point of view as well. Is there are many businesses now that are working with flexible talent, or maybe they call them contingent workforce or contractors, freelancers, however they want to define it. Um, but quite often, that flexible talent is not getting the same experience when they onboard with a company, when they work with a company, access to benefits, access to tools, and even just access to company information. They don't necessarily attend the town halls and things like that, and they maybe don't even have an email address created for them and so on. And so that experience can be quite lonely and demotivating if it's not managed properly. And so our goal is still ultimately to help those members who are the independent doers, but we recognize that they're now working more often with larger companies. And so if we can help make the experience positive from a company side, so that they're identifying and adapting to the needs of the flexible workers. But the flexible workers also feel more confident because they're delivering their best work for these companies. Then we think overall the standard will raise. And so, if I was to say right now, we haven't achieved that product market fit yet. So from us, our point of view is to say, okay, what do we need to learn? How do we go out and ask the right questions to businesses and members on how we can deliver the best service?
And from a business development point of view and that product market fit, what do you see being the two big differences between the consumer side and the enterprise side?
Yeah, so product market fit, I guess, is you have the benefit, I guess, when you're doing a B2C type business. So you have a product maybe that is available online. You can get quick feedback in that sense because you can go one to one to an individual, um, grab a coffee with them, for example, or maybe just send them an email, a survey, or you might even, for example, do a screen share with them and ask them when they're on the call in that sense. With the business, it can be a little bit different because with the businesses, you're dealing with multiple stakeholders who have their own personal goals. So, like, what do they want to achieve for themselves? Be that maybe they have a revenue target to hit, or maybe they have a KPI they need to meet, or they want to get promoted or something like that. But then you also have the department goals, and then ultimately you have the business goals. And sometimes you hope that they align, but the reality is they don't always align in that sense. So that I think the main difference is just being able to bring the right stakeholders in from a B2B point of view, and to make sure everyone feels connected, make sure no one feels left out, and then get that feedback from them. So try to recreate the process you do from a B2C point of view to make it feel like it's a one-to-one type thing, that everyone's opinions are valid and they're able to put them forward. But be realistic enough that it's going to be more complicated because you may be dealing with four, five, six stakeholders, and some people have very specific financial KPIs, whereas other people might have specific business KPIs and so on.
Cool. And Yasas, I'm glad to see that you've been able to join us. This next one's for you. So operational challenges can look very different at different stages of a company. And as someone who's had experience at companies like Meta and now having helped scale Dual Circle across multiple regions, what's a key lesson that you'd want to share with early stage founders, solo entrepreneurs, or freelancers trying to build lean but scalable systems?
Thanks, Varun. Operational excellence is extremely important, regardless of the size of the company or the stage that they are in. But the systems that they would use will differ depending on the size and the stage. Large companies obviously need better systems to kind of automate most of these operational activities so that you can track things well, you can progress things along a certain workflow properly. Whereas a small company might not have the same volume to have all those systems or to need all those systems in place, but it might not mean tech per se. You still need some kind of system to make sure you track your leads are followed through a funnel, and then you track how they progress through that funnel, and if there are things that you can do through that funnel to help them progress through to a sale, for instance. Or if it's a customer feedback loop, how do you take that feedback in to the company and then distribute among the teams that respond to those queries, and then how do you get back to a customer, right? So if you didn't have any systems at all, these will drop at certain points in time. Say a customer has asked a question, this went to a certain team to kind of resolve, but that team didn't update the person who's interfacing with the customer, so customer never hears back from the team, right? But we may have already solved the problem as well. But this is where customers' unhappiness comes in because the service provider or the company does not interact with the company as they should. So that's where systems are important, Varun. It doesn't mean you need high tech to do this, right? You have, say, for example, CRM systems. For a large company, you need pretty advanced CRM systems, and some of them might have to be customized to suit their requirements. But then for a smaller company, you might use a SaaS platform that's available at a much cheaper price. But then if you're really early stage, if you can't even afford that SaaS monthly subscription, you would at least implement a system on spreadsheets, right? Online spreadsheets, so it can be assigned to different team members. So it comes to me and I take the query, I assign to the next team, and then they respond to that or resolve that, assigned to the next team, and comes back to me. But at least there's a spreadsheet to track. So it doesn't mean you need high tech to do this, but that system is important. So what's important for an early stage founder is to understand what are those key flows in my business, right? The sales flow is an important flow, because that's a flow where you make money. So you need to understand and identify how your leads come in, what's the funnel, and how do you enter them in whatever that system that you can afford, and whatever the system that would support the system at that time. And then you have a system, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's a SaaS application that's cheap, or whether it's a fairly advanced CRM system. But sales funnel or sales process is one of the things that you may want to track. Then the customer queries, customer complaints, customer feedback is another process that you may want to track. Then on other projects, like if you take the tech stack and tech development rather, how do you track that? So that you need a system there to estimate time, set deadlines, and then track the workflow and the deliverability of those, right? So it may depend on the business and the stage, but it's important to understand what needs to be tracked. There can be two things that needs to be tracked, or three things that needs to be tracked, or five things that needs to be tracked, depending on what you do. But then you need to develop that system. It's not about, again, tech or the investment involved. It can be as simple as a spreadsheet, but tracking is important. Something I have shared earlier as well is that if you don't track something, you can't manage it, or you can't fix if there was a problem, because you don't know there was a problem in the first place, right? So it's important to have data in place so you have insights and you can respond to those insights.
Great, thank
I
you.
think it's
Just gonna
sorry.
switch to Kavya real quick. I know she had some questions to ask as well, so just take that away.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that the system differs based on the business and the stage that the business is in. But let's say we have a system in place, let's say we're ready to launch. But then if we're a small startup and we want to approach a big business, why would they listen to us? What do you think is the best way to approach a larger business as a small startup or a new business?
And Kavya, you're talking about us having a product, an early stage company. How would we go to a large company with that product? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know it's always difficult, right? Because you don't have proof, you don't have testimonials, you don't have previous clients or case studies to pitch. So it's not easy, and this is like a chicken and egg situation, right? But this is where you also need to be creative, like early stage startups, right? So you find customers who would be willing to, say, help you out to test out the product. And then if they like the product, they may either refer to other people, but they may also be a testimonial. So they have not paid you. They were a free client. You've not made money there, but you have the first test client. So getting a beta version out, getting a few test clients on board on a kind of a relationship basis, or you also develop some collab there, right? I mean, this is something that we see in the startup field a lot, as in you get test customers, but you also offer to test their product. So we become a customer for someone else, but they become our customer as well. So you kind of do a bit of barter system. So it's not costing anything for anyone. But that's one approach where you start to onboard couple of early customers, and then with that you start to grow. The second, I guess, is to get those meetings one way or the other, using your connections, using the network, and doing those demonstrations, right? Because you don't have case studies that actually speak for the product. So the founder and the product team will have to prove to the client or the potential client that this will solve their problems. And then that's where research also comes into play. Having understood what you solve and what the problem that customer is facing, right? So if we can go and say that, okay, you have this problem, we've studied that, and this solution actually solves that problem. And if we are solving a pain point, there's a chance that they give some attention. So at least a potential for a second meeting would arise after first demo. So I mean, a couple of thoughts, Kavya, but then again, it's also being creative and creating those opportunities, creating those avenues, and also being out there talking about the product, right? Because you'd also see early stage founders actively talking about their products on social media, especially LinkedIn, to create that early awareness. Yes, big companies are not necessarily listening, but you also talk a lot about it, create enough awareness that also starts to create the first few meetings, and then slowly you create traction, and also building some credibility around it, like go to a conference to talk about the product, go to certain other events and pitch the product. You so slowly build social proof around it. Yes, you didn't have a lot of clients, but then again, this has been pitched at places and people have seen, and you always don't go and say like you have zero clients, right? Because all the things that you do on LinkedIn, all the things that you do at conferences and events are also building credibility. And then you would say, okay, this has been shared, this has been tested. We've had lots of feedback. That feedback has been taken back in, and we've improved the system. So that's the zero customer situation you can overcome pretty quickly. It's easier said than done, but some thoughts for our founders and freelancers to think about, Kavya.
Yeah, I
I
think
just
it's
want to add
pretty.
as well, caveat to that. Sorry. Um, Agree with everything that Yasas said as well. I think there's a lot of solutions. I think the only thing I would add is people get intimidated by large companies, right? Because they are huge in size. They're usually globally known. They could be household names. But what I've identified, at least in the last sort of decade or so of working here, is that quite often these large companies still operate like smaller businesses. They're almost like a bunch of small businesses together. And the reality then is that you can tackle it in a smaller piece in that sense as well. The challenges these big companies have a lot of the time, they have problems, right? And they want to fix them, but they don't necessarily have the resource to be able to do it. You know, they don't they can't move as fast because it might involve wholesale changes across the business, right? So an example is like HSBC took quite a long time to launch their mobile app globally, for example. And so that's a big change which involves a lot of layers and things like that. But if you're solving for something like for us, I mentioned about the B2B, we can build with them. So like your question earlier was like, how do you do it collaboratively? So if we can propose something where we say, look, we're not proposing that you roll this out to 50 markets and 10,000 people or whatever it may be, but instead, why don't we tackle one problem market closer to home that you can use as a test case, and then use that test case to also build social proof. So all the good things that Yas has mentioned about your own personal branding and your networking and tapping into that as well. If you can build that case study internally with them, there's quite often a lot of advocacy for that as well. So sorry, not to cut you off the coverage, just to add that bit, because I think I've experienced that. Yeah, some of these big businesses, on the face of it, they seem like, like you'd have no chance of working with them. But the reality is you can find a department or a market or something that you can.
Sorry, what did you mean by building a case study internally?
So what I mean by that would be, let's say, I'm trying to think of an example, right? So we spoke with a large consulting firm business, for example, that has more than 100,000 employees worldwide, and a big portion of that, like let's say between 10 and 20% of that, are flexible workers. one of the challenges that they raised to us is that when they want to bring in new ideas and new flexible talent, they have to go to all their department heads and get that information from the department heads. So they need to kind of say, okay, who do you have in your Rolodex, in your black book, in your contact list that we could bring in for a project? And that's very inefficient for them, because then the department head is having to use their time to source potential talent that then has to be then vetted by HR and so on. And so it doesn't work across departments. And so for them, they were like, the first port of call was not necessarily to have a whole new solution for onboarding global flexible talent, but to say, can we just get a solid database of who we already work with right now, so that we could tap into that more easily. And so when I say case study, then what we could then do is, if we could do that mini project with that business, show that there's some positive impact, so time saved, cost saved, some efficiencies in other areas, then all of a sudden you have a proposal to go to the larger part of the business and say, look, we've demonstrated this with one market or one set of talent. What if we were to apply this to 10 times more than that? What would that impact be? And so that's what I mean by case study. It's actually getting a real world example with data over time, and then using that to propose a larger solution. Because then all of a sudden, even if you're a smaller business, you've got an opportunity there, because you've proven it at a more micro level.
That's interesting. So my understanding from this discussion so far is that networking is the key, quite literally. So how would you say, so even this is a community event, right? We keep attending community events to promote our product, network, and learn about other products as well. But how do you make sure that an event like this is more than just transactional, something that actually leads to some business value?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something that we think about a lot, obviously, right? Because we do these events every week. We now have 2 events per week. So we have to be consistent in being able to deliver that, because, and we also think about, okay, what is topical, what is value adding? We had a great session yesterday, for example, where one of the takeaways from that on personal branding was to be able to try and add value where you can when you produce content, because over time that value then equates to improving your network and so on. So you just mentioned, yeah, networking. The saying is your network is your net worth in that regard. So there is a lot of value there. And so I think the key, from my point of view, and I'll try and answer it quicker because I know we've got a lot of other questions to come, is that you want to make sure that if you're doing any community activities, that you try to balance making sure that people go away with it thinking, okay, I've learned something new, or I've thought about something in a different way than what I previously had. So I've got maybe a different perspective on things. And then the reality is that they might, they might not be ready. The timing might not be right for them to go further than that. But if they've at least got some value out of that session, I think that's the key thing, really. And then the reality after that is that when the timing is right, hopefully they'll remember that that event or that person who spoke, that service they have to offer, is the one that they'd like to go into more detail on. And so that's how I kind of see it. There's got to be some value every time, and then but the reality of that as well is that if people are offering their time, then they want to also feel like, for them, that there's some what's the word, like a, not quid pro quo, but like a reciprocation, I think, in that sense, if they're be able to offer value, but they also want to know, okay, can I help you as well? A lot of people are doing our events and they really do want to help everybody to develop their skills, so I think that's something we like.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jamie. I think next we have a couple questions from Jay. So fire away, Jay.
Yeah. So this is for Yasas. So my primary question was that you manage the partnerships at Doer Circle. So how do you look at partnership other than be like making Doer Circle profitable? What are some aspects that you know that this partnership will be worthwhile in terms of profitability and like other things as well?
Thanks, Jay. That's a great question. There are different types of partnerships, Jay. I mean, for example, commercial partnerships in our case would be the solutions that come onto the platform, and we offer that to our members. And that's obviously a commercial in nature because partner is making money, we are making money as well. And then there are other types of partnerships as well. We also do ecosystem partnerships or community partnerships where we work with other organizations who are in the ecosystem who can add value to our members or our business in general, right? And then there are other more advanced types of partnerships around brand partnerships that a company like ours don't do as much, but large companies do those, sometimes marketing partnerships as well. So you have different types of partnerships. So in my experience in the area of commercial partnerships, what you look for is one that commercial relevance, right? Like what the partner offers has relevance, commercial relevance to what we do. Is that in line with what we do? And then does it make sense from a dollars and cents point, right? Like once you do the math, does this make sense? So those are a couple of things that would be important initially, even to kind of get into a conversation, right? If you feel like this lack of alignment from what they do and what we do, you would rather not spend that time. And then the commercial side of it. And then I guess one of the most important things in a partnership is the trust, right? Like once you get into that first conversation, second conversation, you tend to feel like this is someone that you can go on a journey with, like because it's not a short journey, right? You don't do a partnership for a week, for a month. And some of these partnerships, the partnership building process itself can take 6 months, 12 months. Like we have partners where we've been in discussion for 12 months and the deal closes after 12 months. And then from that point you are in business and that's another 2 years, 3 years, right? So you want to feel that at the very beginning that this is a partner that you want to work with. And that's where some of the background study that you do, you ask people around just to see if this is a company that you could work well with. And on the ecosystem side, Jay, you work with say organizations that have potential customers clustered with them so that we can also work with them, but we can also add value to them. But then the commercial value is less for both parties, but at least like you don't have an agreement saying, okay, we share revenue or we pay for this, etc. It's more over time that you get value from those partnerships, right? So you don't have a contract saying this is how the deal is. But in those cases, that trust is even more important. Like, can we trust that you're not poaching your customers or we are not kind of leveraging unfairly kind of situation. So I guess in partnerships, these are some of the basics that I look for, that the alignment with what we do commercially, whether it's making sensible, whether this is a party that you can trust, whether this is a party that you can work long term, and is it a party that you can also add value, right? It should be win-win, right? It shouldn't be just a win for us or a win for them. It should be win-win. And there are instances where you have a couple of conversations, put in some time, and then at one point you feel like you're not able to give that much valuable in this case. And then it's fair to say, okay, let's park this for the time being, and in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, a couple of quarters, we'll get back to this conversation, because you also want to be fair by people's time, right? So it's your time as well as their time. So and for an early stage company, it's important to pick those few things that you think would move the needle, whether it's a commercial partnership, whether it's an ecosystem or a community partnership that can broaden your business. But is this critical for you? Because you have limited time, limited resources. So you would pick those few things and then prioritize accordingly. But as you grow bigger, then you may have a couple of people to do partnerships. Large companies have partnership teams. So then you can segment it. Okay, you focus on this segment, you focus on this segment. Then you can look at more lower priority partners as well. But because we are talking about early stage startups and freelancers here, I would always encourage to do that prioritization. That becomes one of the criteria, right? This is something that I need next week, and then I would spend time. If this is something I need in a year, let it be, and then we come back to that. I'll come back to that later. To just finish off, Jay, most of the partnerships work a lot on trust, but there needs to be some documentation as well. So doing the contractual side of work is also part of this partnerships stream. So some of the partnerships, especially where commercials are involved, you want to make sure that's documented so that there are no disputes later. But then that contract or the document is a piece of paper. If everything goes wrong, you come to that. But then it's the trust and the relationship you build is the most important, so that you can do good business long term. But your basics are also there, so you have somewhere to fall to. But at the same time, that's also something that I would always advise. Make sure you've looked at the detail, it's documented, and you've agreed, and there's some kind of agreement in place as well.
Yeah. So with the trust part, as you said, is it like a gut feeling that you have, or how do you sort of determine the trust? Because especially for startups, you don't really um, know if you can trust an organization or some things like that. What are some factors that you look into to build the trust?
Very good question, Jay. There are a few things that you can do, not kind of being part of a gut feel. Like, for example, checking testimonials, checking with some of the other partners who are already working with, etc. Are some of the technical verifications that you could do, right? Especially if this company has been in business for a while, you could do that. And these days, most of these are online, right? I mean, you're not talking about 10 years ago, right? And today, most of these things you can find online. What's the general feedback like for this company? And also for this, sometimes for this domain within that company, because especially if you're partnering with a large company, different teams, different departments may behave differently as well. So there are certain things you can do online, more in a way like technical verification, if you like, right? Do they have customers? Do they have revenue coming in? Are they profitable? Are they well invested? Do they have customers with positive feedback? That kind of stuff. And then like their Google reviews and whatnot, right? The social proof side. And the rest, I guess, is more the gut feel, right? The person that you talk to, like the way they're speaking about their product. Are they confident? And are they actually disclosing the things that they need to? Obviously, in a discussion, not everyone can disclose everything, right? And we are in the same space as well. There are things that you can disclose, and there are things that you cannot disclose. It's fine, but you need to start feeling, okay, this company is sharing what is needed for this conversation. So in that sense, and also, can you trust the person, and like, are they being trustworthy? Say, for example, if they're saying this is the pricing that we can offer to you, can you trust that that's the best price, right? Because if they have offered better prices to other partners, you might not be competitive in the market space. So in that sense, Jay, there's a bit of gut feel and kind of your own experience that plays a role. And there's also a portion that you can do like on paper, like can we tick this off? Can we tick this off? Kind of stuff as well.
Cool. Thanks, Yasas. I saw Jamie, you have your hand up. Anything you wanted to add to that?
So I come back at
Cool. Put my hand up this. Oh yes, that's you.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, like, because I think this also overlaps into all business development conversations around trust when you're starting out early, because you're seeking partners, you're seeking clients, you might be seeking investors and things like that, and all of the good things that Yasas mentioned there as well. There's questions you can ask as well. Like, I mean, gut is one part of it, I guess, in that sense, your intuition, but you develop that. You know, you wouldn't have that necessarily from the word go in that sense. And that can apply in all your personal relationships and things like that as well. You know, trust is earned in that regard. So you have to sort of show a willingness to earn that trust. And one of the things I think is there are certain questions you can ask early on to establish if there's a trust there. I think if they're willing to be transparent with you about their solution and everything like that, if they're willing to provide you documentation, if they're willing to join you on events, for example, if they're willing to kind of co-brand with you, then all of these things are good signals which helps you build trust with that potential partner as well. If it feels very much one way, so just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, if it feels like you're having to do all the driving and you're not benefiting from it as much yourself in that sense, then there's a question to be asked there, I think, about whether they're taking advantage of you, and whether you can really sort of trust that relationship will develop. But like all relationships, I guess you also have to show a willingness sometimes to take a bit of a gamble with a potential partner. And then if you don't see that being reciprocated early, then I think that would be a good time to maybe put a pause on things. But of course, you can also put things down in writing. You know, you have your contractual agreement. You make sure you definitely don't want to just do a handshake partnership in that sense. So you want to make sure there's something in wording you've got which says that these are the terms. This is the responsibilities of both sides, because you can have a lot of problems down the line if you've kind of said, oh, well, that's what we agreed to do. You know, you said, oh, you would refer this to me or whatever it might be. And actually then they could turn around and say, well, there's nothing that they can contractually that I have to do, you know. So yeah, definitely things you can do to avoid it just being a gut conversation.
Just to quickly add on to that, how do you think that you could get that handshake agreement to pen on paper, like to avoid that awkward conversation? How would you go about that?
I think I would have to reflect on how the conversation had developed so far, like what's been proposed. Um, does it feel like there's a fit in terms of the things that Yas has mentioned about, does it complement each other as a business? Is there a commercial need? Is there actually a value that's being driven? And we have to also think about a third party in that sense, right? Like we might have a really good idea for a partner, but ultimately that partner's services also need to benefit our members, and we are there for our members ultimately. You know, we've had this conversation on a variety of different solutions and services which exist on the platform, which is that we are a curator, I suppose, of services. And so if we put a service on the site that is not a great fit, then that reflects negatively on us, because ultimately we're there to give some element of endorsement to those services to the members in that regard. So that's something, you know, I think it's having that conversation early and then saying, right, look, we recognize now that there's something here. We want to make sure that we've got at least a basic agreement in place to make sure we hold each other accountable. I mean, we have some templates on the site that you could probably look at from a relationship point of view. But even now with all the tools out there, you could probably get something drafted up using one of the AI tools, for example, as a partner agreement. You can also find partner agreements online as well elsewhere that will help give you guidance of like what to include. And then you want to make sure that you don't have too much detail, because I think if you go too detailed early, then that could also potentially scare people off. But you want to make sure there's some, almost like, I think one term that gets used is like a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, because that is almost outlines what we're going to do. It doesn't necessarily say that you are 100% going to do everything in the contract. And sorry, yes, I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, Varun. Your question was whether it's kind of awkward to kind of ask to move from that handshake agreement to a more written formal agreement, right? And early stage founders might feel that way, especially young founders might feel that way when if it's like your first deal, right? But I think with experience, we can also say that it is completely acceptable, completely okay to tell someone that you would like to document it, and maybe it's something that you share along the discussion. Sometimes I mention this in the first discussion itself, like as you close the meeting, whether it was in person or virtually. Sometimes I tend to share, look, we also have a contract template with us, and we can formalize this. You don't have to go into too much detail in the first discussion itself, but you can hint that this is coming, so that they know that formalizing is on the cards. So it's not like a news that you drop after that handshake agreement, right? So along the way, you tell them we will formalize this, and in business, that's completely acceptable.
Great, thank you so much. And Han, I know you had some questions as well that you wanted to ask.
Yep, thank you. So this is for either Jamie or Yasas. I'm just curious, like, have you ever reapproached a potential partner or company that didn't say yes first time, and what made you go back to them? Or it could be you that didn't say yes.
I'm happy to go first. There have been situations like that, Han. You had a conversation at the beginning, and then you may have said no, or you decided to park, obviously, while informing them, or they may have parked it as well. But then after a year or 6 months, you go back, or they come back. That's very natural in business, because business is a dynamic thing, right? So the circumstances that we have today can be very different from the circumstances 6 months down the line or 12 months down the line, and situation has changed, right? So they or us, we can go back and say like, look, things have changed. This is the update. We've changed this part of the business, or we've introduced this new product, and we would now like to have a new conversation with you, or restart the previous conversation, and you can still have successful closures even in those cases, and that's very common. And but when you go back, it also depends on the trust that you built before. If you didn't feel like this is a party that you want to work with, I might not go back, because those things may not have changed, right? Like, you couldn't look eye to eye. There were misalignments with people itself, and then 6 months down the line, it may not have changed if it's the same person still leading the conversation, right? But then again, businesses are dynamic. The person that you didn't feel is right may have moved on, and people change jobs, people, companies do restructurings, etc. So this is completely fine. But before you go back, I would always check the new situation a little bit, and always go with an update, right? It's not like you ghosted them, and now all of a sudden you woke up and then you want to have a conversation again. You need a bit of a justification to say why you are coming back, and and then take it from there. And if the conversation was quite positive, but for certain business reasons you parked it, usually we also keep in touch with them. I guess both Jamie and I, we work in a very externally exposed domains, right? So we are not internally focused resources in that sense, or professionals in that sense. So we maintain our network anyway. So we do maintain these relationships either on WhatsApp, either over a coffee, depending on the level of relationship. So if it was an important one you parked for certain reason, typically it's not like I'm going back after a year, like all of a sudden. I would have kept in touch, and this is also where your active LinkedIn presence plays a role, because that person follows you and you follow them as well, so you kind of know as to what each other is doing, so you don't kind of come across as someone who has been completely hiding under a rock or something. You've been kind of around, and you've been talking about what you do, and then that also helps that continuity and trust. And trust, as Jamie said, is built over time. Yes, that conversation stopped, but that didn't stop trust building, right? Trust continues to build.
Yeah, and I'd just add also from a business development point of view, like it happens a lot, you know. I think it depends on who you work with. So for founders, freelancers, for example, who if you're working in a B2B environment, like larger enterprise businesses, you know, a 6, 9, even 12-month period can almost be structured in a way that you know, they might say to you, right, okay, this is not a fit right now, but let's talk in a year's time. And as an individual, sometimes you can kind of you hear that and you think a year, like it's so long, like there's so much that could happen in that time. But for some of these businesses that move a lot slower, that's you know that's only a small gap for them, and actually, you know, it might take a lot longer. You know, there's a one deal I was working on over a 2-year period, and it didn't. This is a previous company I was at, and it didn't happen at that moment. But then I was in town a couple of months ago, and then I bumped into that person again, and they just told me that they signed the deal, and you know, it was like fantastic to hear. But it also reminded me that these things can take, like, that was ultimately like basically 3 years that it took to happen in that sense. I mean, that's not to say that all these deals would take that long. Like, hopefully you need to look at your product and your service and see, okay, what is the typical time it takes to make a decision? You know, when are your windows? But the other thing, last thing I'd add on that is, I've said this on another call before, there's a statistic out there that says that 3% of your audience, and audience, I mean the people that are going to be a fit for the service or product or whatever it is that you're offering, only 3% are in market at any given time of the year. So it's really important, like Yasas just said, to maintain your own personal profile. It's important that if you've got something of value to offer, be it, I don't know, we've just launched a new functionality, or we've got this new product, or this service has now been improved with AI or something like that. You know, there's a lot of that these days. To keep in touch with those people, maybe pop them a note on WhatsApp, pop them a note on email, whatever it might be. You don't have to, it's not about sending them a, are you ready to buy it or something like that, but it's just the little touch points that help them remember you on the top of their mind when they are in market. So as I said, 3% is the key here. It's a very small portion of your audience. And so that's why it's really important every single quarter to at least have one touch point with that person. Because as I said, things can change. You know, if you imagine like a business could be like halfway through the year, and then all of a sudden a new initiative comes out, or I don't know, maybe a new CFO joins the business in these large companies. I've seen it happen. And the new CFO kind of comes in and says, right, we're going to be doing cost cutting measures across the board, and we're going to do, and that could have an impact then, because then suddenly that business is like, well, we need to be more efficient with our costs. What solutions do we have that can help us be efficient? And you might be that solution provider. So all of a sudden now you're very relevant to them. The timing is right. You know, everything is aligned. So that's why it's really important to keep in touch and circle back, as you said, because you might miss that window again, and then it might not come around again for another year. So just keep regularly on that.
Cool. Thank you so much. Seeing as we're approaching the end of our time, I just wanted to kind of wrap up the whole session, and for Yasas and Jamie, could you give, say, one or two pointers from our last hour discussion that you think was the most important that freelancers and I guess solo entrepreneurs should kind of focus on?
Go first. I'll go first on this one. Sorry, how many pointers is it again?
Just one or two.
Three. One or two. Okay, one or two. Of the ones that we said, so I mean, maybe the last one I just mentioned, I think is super relevant because it applies to anybody, you know, and I think the advice I try to give to people is things that you can control. There's some factors you can't control. Obviously, you can't control a business decision that's made out of your hands. Sometimes there's politics, or sometimes there's, you know, there could be one person in the room that has a different agenda to everybody else, and they can scupper things in that sense. So you can't uh, tie yourself too personally to the outcome, but what you can look at is what can I control? What can I do to to be able to sit back at the end of the day and say I've done as much as I could. You know, I've given all the information, I've shared the value. You know, if they're not going to go ahead for some reason, then that's okay. So as a founder, as a freelancer, just be regularly interacting, building your network. You know, so that's the key thing, like tap into your network. And then another point, I guess, from a founder point of view, is try as soon as possible to establish that product market fit. I think if you can establish that as soon as you can, then it helps you in so many ways. As a founder, it helps you become investable, because a lot of those sort of venture capitals, family offices, even high net worth individuals, these days, you know, they can't necessarily invest in a business just purely on the vibe, or even maybe the founder, right? If the founder is very charismatic or charming, whatever it might be, they need some numbers. So if you can show that we've actually found people that are willing to buy our service or willing to recommend it to others, then you've got an investable business there. If that's what you want to do, of course you might not want to. But likewise, also when you're a service provider, maybe even if you're a freelance service provider, you need to work out, is my offering a fit? Like, is it the case that when I go and present and pitch to these potential clients, is it landing? You know, is it addressing enough of a pain point that they're looking for? And if you've got that fit, then you can just multiply that, because then you can go to more people and say, right, this has worked in this market with this provider. Let's do it again. You know, we've proven the case. So those are the two things I would focus on: product market fit and developing a network.
Cool. And Yasas, what are your two?
Yeah, I'll share two as well. One, something that I didn't share earlier, but the other one I'll emphasize again. The new one I wanted to share, although it's the last minute, is that partnerships also work a bit like sales. I think it's known or understood that in sales, you have a sales funnel, right? To get a certain number of customers or a certain number of revenue, you maintain a leads pool, and then kind of progress the leads through that sales funnel. And that's kind of known and understood. But I think it's not that well understood by early stage founders that the same kind of concept applies for partnerships as well. If your business is highly dependent on partners, depends on the business itself, but if it's highly dependent on partners, then you need to have the same concept laid out as well. How many partners are you looking at, and when do you need those partners by? And then what's the funnel like? To get 5 partners, how many partners do you need to start conversations with? And then to the next stage, then to contract stage. And some people even might not sign after having a contract draft done as well. So managing that partnerships funnel is also equally important when you build out a partnerships discipline within a startup, within a company. That's the first point I wanted to share, which I couldn't share earlier. The second one I would like to emphasize again on the importance of community and ecosystem partnerships. A lot of startups, a lot of founders go after customers, and that's quite obvious, right? Because to sustain the business, you need to get the product out, get buying customers on board, and that's kind of quite clear and obvious. However, they forget the fact that they can work with ecosystem partners or community partners, say chambers, for instance, or community organizations, if the product is relevant, could be even NGOs, for instance, right? And these people can help take the product, the brand out there and also build trust in the community. You're basically building a community that's aware about the product, and some of them also may become customers. But that's very important, and that's relatively cost effective because you're not advertising, you're only building relationships. But this is slower. It's not like pitching to a client. This is more like warming up a potential client. If you can convert a client in, let's say, 2 weeks, this process might take 6 months. But it is also equally important because it's not only acquiring clients, but it's also building that brand, building that trust in the community. But it's important to pick the right organizations or right partners who would be helpful in building the trust and getting you to the market. I mean, business chambers is an easy example because they have members who are potential clients, and chambers are typically NGOs. They are non-government and they are not for profits, right? So, and if their logo is on your website or on your events, that adds to your credibility because you're actually riding on their credibility. So this is something that a lot of founders don't think about. So I wanted to emphasize on that again.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. It was a really cool chat and really cool perspectives. And other than that, I think we're done for this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks,
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 everyone.
everyone.
See ya.
Bye, guys.